The year is 1700 AD. Germanic tribes are crossing the Danube. Plague ravages Rome. The empire is collapsing from within. And in a military tent on the frozen frontier, the most powerful man in the world sits alone with a journal, writing to himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Marcus Aurelius wasn't writing philosophy for the public. He was training himself to remain unshakable while the world burned around him. For 13 years he faced war, plague, betrayal, and the death of nearly everything he loved. Yet he never broke, not because he was superhuman, because he practiced specific mental disciplines every single day. Today I'm going to show you exactly what he did. Not theory, the actual practices that kept the philosopher-emperor standing when everyone else fell. Who he was. Before we go deeper, you need to understand who Marcus Aurelius actually was. He didn't choose to be emperor. He was adopted into the role at 17, trained by the greatest philosophers in Rome, expected to rule the known world. Most people imagine emperors as tyrants drunk on power. Marcus saw it differently. He called the purple imperial robe a costume, and himself a soul carrying a corpse. By his 40s, when he wrote most of his meditations, he'd already lost 8 of his 13 children, watched plague kill millions, spent years in freezing military camps fighting endless wars on the northern frontier. He had every reason to become bitter, cynical, or cruel. Instead, he became one of history's most admired leaders. How? Through 3 disciplines he practiced relentlessly. 3 mental exercises that created what he called an inner citadel, a fortress of the mind that external chaos couldn't penetrate. Discipline 1. Contemplatio mortis, the morning meditation on mortality. Every morning Marcus practiced what the Stoics called contemplatio mortis, the contemplation of death. He wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This wasn't morbid, it was clarifying. When you deeply accept that today might be your last, trivial concerns dissolve. The argument that consumed your thoughts yesterday, meaningless. The slight someone gave you, irrelevant. The promotion you didn't get, who cares? What remains is what actually matters, how you treat people, whether you live by your principles, if you're becoming who you want to be. Marcus practiced this every morning before facing another day of impossible responsibilities. He would sit quietly and remind himself, "This could be my final sunrise. If it is, did I live yesterday in a way I'm proud of? Will I live today as if it's my only chance?" I started practicing this 6 months ago. Every morning 5 minutes, I close my eyes and genuinely consider, if I died tonight, would I be satisfied with how I spent today? The effect is immediate and uncomfortable. All the petty resentments I carry, they evaporate. The person I've been meaning to call, I call them. The work I've been procrastinating, I do it now because now is all I have. Marcus wrote, "Do not act as if you had 10,000 years to live. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." Here's the practice. Tomorrow morning, before you check your phone, sit for 5 minutes. Ask yourself, if this were my last day, what would truly matter? Then let that answer guide your choices. Death awareness doesn't make you morbid, it makes you present. It cuts through the fog of everyday distraction and shows you what's real. When everything else failed Marcus, when the empire crumbled, when his children died, when war dragged on endlessly, this practice remained. Because mortality is the one truth no circumstance can change. You will die, so will everyone you know. The only question is, what will you do with the time you have? Discipline 2. Objectum contemplatio. Seeing things as they truly are. Marcus trained himself to see reality, without the emotional stories we layer over it. He wrote, "Strip away the legend that encrusts an event, and then just look at what it is, at its substance." Here's what he meant. Someone insults you at work. Most people experience this as, "They attacked me. They don't respect me. They're trying to undermine me. I need to defend myself." But strip away the emotional narrative. What actually happened? A person made sounds with their mouth. You interpreted those sounds as threatening. Your body responded with stress hormones. That's it. Marcus practiced objectum contemplatio, objective contemplation, looking at events as a scientist would, without judgment or emotion. He applied this to everything. Expensive wine, fermented grape juice, beautiful robes, sheep wool dyed with shellfish blood, even death itself, a natural process, like leaves falling from a tree. This sounds cold. It's not. It's liberating. When you see things as they truly are, stripped of the drama your mind creates, most suffering disappears. Because most suffering isn't caused by events, it's caused by your interpretation of events. A project fails. The event, "This approach didn't work." Your interpretation, "I'm a failure. Everyone thinks I'm incompetent. My career is over." The event is neutral. The interpretation creates suffering. I practice this daily now. When something upsets me, I physically say out loud, "What actually happened here?" stripped of my story about it. Last month I wasn't invited to an important meeting. My immediate story, they don't value my input, I'm being sidelined, they're trying to push me out. Then I practiced objectum contemplatio. What actually happened? A meeting occurred. I wasn't on the invite list, that's all. The rest was a narrative I created. When I looked at it objectively, I realized I'd been excluded from many meetings before without it meaning anything. This wasn't personal, it was scheduled. Marcus wrote, "If you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you but your own judgment about it, and it is in your power to wipe out this judgment now." Here's the practice. When something disturbs you today, ask what's the objective fact here, separate from my interpretation. Write down both. Notice how much of your suffering exists only in interpretation. This discipline saved Marcus through unimaginable loss. When his children died, he couldn't change that reality, but he could see it clearly. Death is natural. Everyone dies. My children died young, which is painful. But I will not add to that pain by telling myself stories about cosmic injustice. That's not coldness, that's courage to face reality exactly as it is. Discipline 3, sympathia, understanding the whole. The final discipline is perhaps the most powerful, sympathia, understanding your connection to the whole. Marcus wrote, "Meditate often on the interconnectedness and mutual interdependence of all things in the universe." He saw himself not as a separate entity but as one part of a larger system. Like a hand connected to a body, the hand serves the body nourishes the hand. Neither exists independently. This shifted how he viewed difficulty entirely. Bad things happened to him constantly. But he asked, is this obstacle bad for the whole or just uncomfortable for me? A drought affects the empire. That's bad for the whole, people starve. But being insulted at the Senate, that's just uncomfortable for his ego, not actually harmful to anything that matters. He wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Every obstacle was an opportunity to practice virtue. Faced with betrayal, practice forgiveness. Faced with loss, practice acceptance. Faced with injustice, practice patience. Not because these responses were easy, but because they served the whole better than anger, bitterness, or revenge. I struggled with this concept until last year. I was passed over for a position I'd worked toward for 3 years. My first response was rage. This is unfair, this is wrong, someone should fix this. Then I asked Marcus's question, is this bad for the whole, or just uncomfortable for me? Uncomfortable for me, absolutely, but bad for the whole. The person who got the position might do excellent work, the organization might benefit. My not getting it freed me to pursue other opportunities. Within 6 months, I'd moved into a different role I never would have considered if I'd gotten that promotion. Better aligned with my strengths, more fulfilling. The obstacle became the way. Not through magical thinking, but through asking a better question. Here's the practice. When something goes wrong, ask, how might this serve something larger than my immediate comfort? You don't have to believe everything happens for a reason. You just have to look for how you can use what happens to become better. Marcus faced 13 years of war he never wanted. He couldn't change that. But he could ask, how does a philosopher-emperor lead during wartime? What virtues can I practice here that I couldn't practice in peace? That perspective shift from this shouldn't be happening to this is happening. How do I respond with virtue? Made him unshakable. Integration. Marcus practiced all 3 disciplines together, every day. Morning, contemplatio mortis. I might die today. What truly matters? Throughout the day, objectum contemplatio. What's actually happening here? Stripped of my emotional story. When facing difficulty, sympathia. How does this serve something larger than my comfort? These weren't abstract philosophical concepts. They were survival tools. Picture him in that frozen military tent. News arrives. Another defeat. More soldiers dead. Plague spreading through the camps. Senators back in Rome plotting against him. Any of those things could break a person. Together they could destroy an empire. But Marcus sits with his journal. He practices his disciplines. He writes, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." He doesn't deny the pain. He doesn't pretend it's easy. He transforms the obstacle into a training ground. That's why he remained unshakable. Not because nothing shook him, but because he had practices that helped him steady himself after every tremor. Marcus Aurelius died in that military camp in 1888. He never saw Rome again. He spent his final years doing work he hated, in conditions that broke most men, watching nearly everything he loved die. Yet the words he wrote to himself in those darkest moments have guided millions of people for 18 centuries. Why? Because he showed us that being unshakable doesn't mean nothing touches you. It means you have practices that help you remain centered when everything tries to move you. You will face loss, betrayal, failure, injustice. You can't prevent that. Marcus, the most powerful man alive, couldn't prevent it. But you can practice what he practiced. Face your mortality each morning. It clarifies everything. See reality as it is, not as your fear interprets it. Ask how difficulty might serve something larger than your comfort. These three disciplines created an inner citadel that external chaos couldn't penetrate. They worked for a Roman emperor. They'll work for you. So here's my question. Which of these three disciplines do you most need to practice tomorrow morning? Drop a comment and let me know. If this moved you, subscribe to Stoic Forge. Every video here brings you the unfiltered wisdom of the ancient Stoics, not as academic philosophy, but as practical tools for staying unshakable in a world that constantly tries to shake you. Hit the like button, share this with someone who needs it, and remember Marcus's words, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.